As Sam Darnold said in the post-game press conference, what a weird game we watched on Monday Night Football, but the Seahawks victorious over the Houston Texans. I'll be breaking down how they got it done here on our post-game edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12s. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A special thanks to all the 12s for being patient here on this late night game. Game didn't even end till 10:30 Pacific time, so thank you for hanging in there and waiting for the start of the show after press conferences and all the other stuff that happens post-game for reporters like myself. But anyway, special thanks to all of you that are tuning in, whether you're in nearby West Seattle or you're listening over in London. Good morning to all of our listeners from overseas that are tuning in to watch Locked On Seahawks. The Seahawks improving to 5-2. It wasn't pretty. In fact, it was extremely sloppy, but Mike Macdonald's team gets it done. A 27-19 victory over the Houston Texans. 4 turnovers on the offensive side of the football, one of them leading directly to a touchdown for the Houston Texans. So certainly, as Cooper Kupp said after the game, you could say there was a lot of bad football that was being played, losing football that was being played. And yet the Seattle Seahawks found a way to get it done, in large part due to the defense. When you look at the game stats, the Texans actually had more passing yards in this game than Seahawks did, with 229, 213 for Sam Darnold. The Seahawks had those 4 turnovers, as I mentioned, an interception by Darnold, interception thrown by Cooper Kupp on an ill-fated trick play, Darnold getting strip sacked in the end zone in the third quarter, recovered by Will Anderson for a touchdown, and then Elijah Arroyo joined the fun with a fumble in the third quarter as well. But Seattle still dominated the time of possession in this game. They had a ton of penalties, but less penalty yards than what the Texans did. They never trailed. They had a 15-point lead at one point, and all of it boiled down to the way that the defense played for the Seahawks in this football game. They were suffocating from start to finish. Literally the first drive of the game for the Houston Texans, Drake Thomas comes rocketing through the A gap on a bull, was up for a 3-yard loss. After DeMarcus Lawrence had chased him, C.J. Stroud back into the pocket, drove him more than 15 yards back. After that particular play, Uchenna Nwosu chases down the quarterback, and it looked like he had a safety. In fact, one of the officials even signaled a safety. Mike Macdonald thought the Seahawks had 2 points on defense, and it turned out that wasn't the case. They ruled that forward progress, C.J. Stroud was down at the 1-yard line, but that made it clear the tone that was going to be set by the defensive line, by the linebackers. The front 7 in general dominated Houston's front line. The Texans finishing with 31 rushing yards on 15 carries by their running backs. Wouldn't have had more than 3 yards per carry if not for a long scramble by C.J. Stroud late in the game. The running backs, though, barely averaged 2 yards per carry. It was an utterly dominant effort up front. They got 8 quarterback hits, 3 sacks. They were able to get after C.J. Stroud and make him really uncomfortable from the early portion of that game. And they really maintained it all the way to the end. They did give up a touchdown late to make it an 8-point lead for the Seahawks. And that certainly is a drive Mike Macdonald wishes they could have had a few plays back. But they gave up 12 points in this game to the Houston Texans. 19 on the scoreboard, 7 of those directly going to the offense. They had the 12 points they gave up. C.J. Stroud had 49 pass attempts in this game, and 12 of them ended with pass breakups. 1 ended with an interception. So 13 passes defensed for the Seahawks defense. On those 49 pass attempts, they were getting their hands on the football regularly in coverage with their linebackers, their corners, their safeties. Ernest Jones had a tremendous interception where he was falling down, started getting up, reached out, and was able to snag the interception. So really it was an all-around effort for Seattle's defense. They were great against the run. Their pass rush was feisty, not as much as last week, but they were still able to get the job done. And they also had the play on the back end where they were getting a lot of broken up passes. They got an interception, and they just made life really tough for the Houston Texans offense. Aside from having a handful of plays where tight end Dalton Schultz came wide open out in the flats, that seemed to be the only offense the Texans consistently had on this particular night. The defense carried Seattle, and then they were able to get enough fireworks on offense. Jaxon Smith-Njigba, another impressive game. His fifth 100-plus yard receiving game already this year. That's tied for the second most in a single season in Seahawks franchise history. And, oh, by the way, we're only 7 games into the season. So Jaxon Smith-Njigba's got a lot of time to add more 100-plus yard games. But JSN continues to be a nightmare for opposing defenses with his releases, his route running, his after-the-catch ability, his downfield ability, the complete package. This is a Texans defense that has a ton of talent. They have a championship-caliber defense in Houston. The offense isn't anywhere close to that. But their secondary, Derek Stingley Jr., Kamari Lassiter, Jalen Petrie, they've got a lot of really good players in the back end. This was supposed to be the biggest challenge that JSN has had up to this point, and it still didn't matter. They could not slow him down, made a bunch of big catches, had an 11-yard touchdown catch on a slant that Sam Darnold fired into the tightest of windows and got it to his star receiver, had an 18-yard catch on a 4th-and-1 conversion in the second half that led to a field goal, had a 26-yard catch that led to another field goal. He was just dominant start to finish in this game, and the Texans, even with the talent they have in the back end, couldn't slow him down. And even the run game, it was not a great game raw stat-wise for the Seahawks. Ken Walker, the third average under 4 yards per carry, got stuffed quite a few times. Zach Charbonnet got stuffed to the line of scrimmage or in the backfield a few times, but they got 2 touchdowns from Charbonnet in the red zone, the first one being the most impressive, with several teammates helping him power his way past the goal line when it looked like he was going to be stopped for a loss initially, add another touchdown in the second half. So they were able to finish drives in the red zone. 3 touchdowns they got inside the opposing 20, and that has been the one Achilles heel for this Texans defense. The Seahawks were able to take advantage of that, and the defense set them up with scoring position in Houston territory, starting position in Houston territory on 3 of their 5 scores they had in this game. So the defense directly impacted that. And aside from that, Seahawks had a lot of other drives that were going well, and then penalties or turnovers ended up being their undoing, or poor clock management, as I'll talk about later. There's a lot of things that Mike Macdonald can look at in this game. He and his coaching staff, they've got a full week off to really look at this game and the first 7 games in general and try to attack some of these things. This is still a team that's turning the football over more than you want to. It hasn't really been Sam Darnold till today. Unfortunately, he's got to get the ball out of the red zone, not the red zone, the inside the 20-yard line. He's got to get the football out when he's near the end zone and not try to extend plays. That ended up backfiring. The interception was an ugly one in the fourth quarter. They're going to have to clean some of that stuff up, and yet there's still so much to be excited about because this is a Texans defense that came into this game giving up 12.2 points per game, the best mark in the NFL. Seattle put up 27 on them, even with 4 turnovers. They could have put up 40 easily in this game. So clean up some of those mistakes that ended up dogging you in this game, and you still managed to win. Those are always, it's kind of a give or take thing with a coach. You have to look at all these things that went wrong, but you also have to say, hey, we still got it done. We still found a way to be resilient. We still found a way to win this football game, even with having 12 penalties, even with having 4 turnovers. We did what we needed to do on defense. We gave the offense chances, short field, to go put quick points on the board, and they were able to be consistent in the red zone. They did enough to win this game. Still a ton of stuff to work on, particularly in the offensive side of the football, but they're going to get a whole extra week off here with their bye, and they're going to be 5-2. They are tied up with the Rams and the 49ers, 3-way tie atop the NFC West, which is as good as any division out there. The Cardinals have lost 5 games, but they've been very competitive in all those games. This is a very deep division. The Seahawks right in the thick of things in that 3-way tie atop the division. So might not have been pretty. It was a sloppy game, but the Seahawks found a way to eke this one out. And they've got the same record as their two other rivals atop the division. Mike Macdonald's team right where they want to be heading into the bye and hoping to continue surging in the second half. Coming up next, I'm going to dish out my weekly game balls, offense, defense, and special teams. That'll be coming your way here on our post-game edition of Locked On Seahawks. Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. They follow what moves them every time they drive, and that's what makes Mazda stand out. They go beyond safety, style, and performance to deliver a driving experience that feels alive in every detail. As an athlete focuses on every detail, Mazda does the same, from metallic accents to hand-stitched Napa leather. You can feel it the moment you get behind the wheel. The smooth handling, intuitive controls, and standard all-wheel drive at every crossover SUV. Whether it's a quick drive to practice or a weekend road trip, Mazda makes everyday drives feel special. It's the small details that make the big plays. And just like there's more to every player, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Welcome back to the post-game edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in on this late Monday night. It's actually transitioning into Tuesday morning, even in the Pacific Northwest. Thanks for hanging in there, being patient on these late night games. Seahawks getting the 27-19 victory over the Houston Texans, improving their record to 5-2 on the season, a three-way tie atop the NFC West. Wasn't pretty most of the game. One of the uglier, more bizarre games that you were going to see. I really liked how Sam Darnold put it, that this was a weird game. There was a lot of strange stuff that happened for both sides, but the Seahawks able to get out with the W and improve their record at home. This is the fifth win they've now had with Mike Macdonald at Lumen Field since the start of the 2024 season. A long way to go to being where they want to be, but stepping stones, winning games in front of the 12s. Let's get to our game balls for Monday Night Football. And on offense, look, this is becoming a broken record. It's that way for opposing defenses trying to figure out what they are going to do with Jaxon Smith-Njigba, and nobody seems to have an answer. Really, the only answer right now might be the goalpost getting dunked on and it being a 15-yard penalty. Yes, Jaxon Smith-Njigba did that tonight after his touchdown. As Sam Darnold said in his press conference afterwards, we might have to have a talk because, you're not supposed to do that. But nonetheless, got up there, dunked it on the goalpost, got the crowd fired up. And the Texans, this again was a defense that looked primed to have the pieces in place in their secondary to be able to at least somewhat neutralize Jaxon Smith-Njigba with an all-pro in Derek Stingley. And they've also got a really good player in Kamari Lassiter. On the other side, Petrie in the slot has been outstanding this year. It didn't matter what the Texans did, though. Number 11 was getting open from the outset, and Sam Darnold was looking for him in critical situations. Right out of the gate, got some big plays downfield to him, had the 11-yard touchdown that was followed by that slam dunk on the goalpost. And then in the second half, had 18-yard completion, an out route that was on 4th and 1, a critical 4th and 1 they went for in Houston territory. Got a field goal on that drive. Next drive, feathers a 26-yard completion to him on a fade route. JSN hauls it in, just had the ball go over the shoulder of Lassiter in coverage. JSN had just a step on him. That's all he needs. He just needs a sliver of daylight, and he can make big plays downfield. Sam Darnold can get the football to him. This continues to be as dynamic of a quarterback-receiver duo as you're going to see. Over 120 receiving yards for Jaxon Smith-Njigba. 3 straight games he's gotten over the 100-yard mark 5 times this year, as I mentioned earlier, tied for the second most in team history in a single season, and he's done it in just the first 7 games. Still leading the NFL receiving yards by a pretty large margin right now after 7 games, and starting to stack touchdowns, it seems like, every week now on top of those raw receiving stats. So JSN getting the job done, had an after-the-catch play on 3rd and 7 that he was able to turn from a 5 or 6 yard slant into a 19-yard gain that extended a drive. Seahawks have had a really hard time getting third down conversions. He's been one of the few guys that's been able to consistently do that. So JSN continues to get the job done. Easily the game ball winner on offense with Everybody else making a lot of big mistakes. Jaxon Smith-Njigba did everything right except for his penalty dunking on the goalpost. I think the Seahawks can live with that since Jason Myers made the longer extra point. It all ended up being serviceable for the Seattle Seahawks, and they'll take that 11-yard touchdown. Meanwhile, the defensive side of the ball, I actually had a kind of a tough time with this one because there were 3 or 4 players that I thought were worthy of getting a game ball on that side of the ball with what they did holding the Houston Texans to 12 points. There were so many guys that starred and came up with big games for the Seahawks. But at the end of the day, Ernest Jones was the catalyst that really fueled that defensive performance. He was shooting gaps, blowing up run plays. He had a sack that he had in the second quarter on CJ Stroud where he was able to force a backward pass that was recovered by Drake Thomas, his fellow linebacker, and nearly led to a touchdown or safety on that play. And then he had the tremendous interception early in the third quarter where he had fallen down. He was trying to get up when the throw was made by CJ Stroud. And he said in his postgame press conference that he was hoping that God was with him, and God fortunately was. He reached out and was able to pluck that interception on that throw from CJ Stroud. So he's got 3 now on the season. He did everything. He was at the center of holding the Texans to barely having 2 yards per carry with their running backs. He was flying all over the field. Had a couple times he got his hands on the football, the interception, had a pass breakup, had a sack. CJ Stroud was having nightmares about number 13 coming after him with blitzes. He was doing everything. And number 13 continues to be the engine, the driving force of this defense. He makes the calls, so important to the performance they've had with all the injuries they've had, keeping everybody on the same page. And that trade last year continues to look like an absolute steal. The contract they signed Ernest Jones to, 3 years, $33 million, is looking like an absolute bargain, playing as good a football as any middle linebacker out there. And on special teams, I don't like to give multiple players game balls, but in this case, Jason Myers had a field goal blocked. I do wonder about the punishment that the long snapper Chris Stahl was taking. Didn't seem like that was within the rules, but the officials seem to be overlooking it on multiple field goal attempts in this game. I got to give it to a couple of the return men in particular. George Halani was 1 block away on a long kick return from potentially taking it the distance. Again, I think 1 extra block. He got to the 38 for the Texans before he was tackled. 1 more block, he might have been sprung, and we might be talking about a special teams touchdown for George Halani. And Torrey Horton had a couple of exciting plays as a punt returner in this game, had a 19-yard return, had a couple others where it looked like he was dead to rights and was able to turn nothing into something, getting solid yards as a punt returner. He had one that he muffed, was able to recover, got some yardage after. So I thought special teams-wise that the kick and punt returners, in particular, Halani and Horton, I thought that those 2 guys were as impressive as anybody. Brady Russell made a couple nice tackles on special teams as well, so he could be an honorable mention selection here. But I continue to be impressed by what we're seeing in the kick and punt return game. I'm hoping Derek Young's okay. He exited with a hip injury and did not return. The fact they ruled him out that quickly is always concerning, but you do have a bye week coming up. Derek Young was leading all kick returners in average per return going into this game. So I've really been impressed with what Jay Harbaugh has done in terms of building around the new kickoff rules now in year 2 and really getting that punt return shored up. This has become a dangerous part of Seattle's team, their return teams, and I think that needs to be credited to Jay Harbaugh and to these new guys they've put into these positions. Halani wasn't doing it last year. Horton obviously is a rookie, first year in the NFL. They've entrusted these guys those responsibilities, and they've been as dynamic as any team in terms of getting big chunk yards on kick and punt returns. That continued in this game, setting up some solid starting field position for the Seahawks. When I come back, as we do each and every post-game show, it's time for 3 Up, 3 Down Stock Watch. Who's hot coming out of Monday Night Football? Who's not? Who's going to be looking to bounce back after the bye week? We'll be getting to that coming up next here on our post-game edition of Locked On Seahawks. Welcome back to the Postgame edition, Locked On Seahawks, live here from Lumen Field. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in these wee early hours of Tuesday morning. This is technically the Monday show, but this is what happens when you have a 7 p.m. start Pacific time. The show comes a little later than normal circumstances would normally have. Regardless, let's get to our Stock Watch weekly 3 up, 3 down. Who's hot? Who's not, and going to start on the offensive side of the football. And I know that this has kind of been a discussion point for a lot of Seahawk fans. There's been frustration. It really feels like there's two different groups. There's one that believes Ken Walker III just simply is not getting enough opportunities. The Seahawks are not getting on the field enough. And, you know, who cares about the managing his foot injury he was dealing with in the offseason and in training camp? He's looked great. Let's just keep feeding the football. And then there's the other party that says, hey, Zach Charbonnet hasn't had near the blocking in front, but we think if we run more between the tackles, Zach Charbonnet is more effective in this offense. So those two parties tonight, I don't know that there's going to be anything that's changing in terms of the discussion, the arguments between those two sides, because Charbonnet was the more effective runner today. Over 4 yards per carry, had several punishing runs between the tackles, including a 15-yarder in this game. And he was money in the red zone, 2 rushing touchdowns. And I know that some of this has to do with fantasy football. There's certainly some fantasy owners out there that don't like it that Zach Charbonnet is getting these opportunities in short yardage in the red zone instead of Ken Walker III. But the Seahawks don't care about your fantasy football team. They care about their football team and winning games. And clearly Zach Charbonnet, they feel, is the better option in those short yardage and in red zone goal line situations. And today he showed why. The first touchdown, he looked like he was stopped in the backfield for a loss and kept those Pistons firing. Next thing you know, get several linemen, AJ Barner trying to push him along, and he ends up powering his way past the goal line for a touchdown. The second one, he showed off his vision, found a small crease in the crowded goal line in the trenches, and was able to sneak through, get a 2-yard touchdown. So Zach Charbonnet was the better running back today. Walker's had his games where certainly he has been the better one. But nonetheless, I think that this is a situation where this is going to continue to play out week by week, where you are going to be seeing, how you doing? I got Turbo here, guys. Turbo's here. Yeah, Locked On Seahawks. Yeah. Got my buddy Turbo jumping in here.
Sorry I couldn't make it tonight, fellas. I had to do the pre and post for the radio
This isn't Seahawks Squad show. This is the regular Locked On Seahawks. But
right.
But you will see him maybe tomorrow. You see,
absolutely.
You'll see Turbo. He'll have his analysis of this game. But going back to the running backs, Zach Charbonnet had the better game today, so he's the first one for our Stock Watch 3 up, 3 down that had a really strong performance in this victory. Next up on the list, got to go to one of the catalysts on defense, a guy that continues to impress in the middle. Drake Thomas, at this point, doesn't seem like he is going to be giving his starting job back to Tyrese Knight anytime soon. Coming off that great game in Jacksonville today, he was one of their leaders in tackles. He had 5 tackles today, had a tackle for loss in the backfield in the opening drive, had 3 pass breakups in coverage, had a quarterback hit. He was everywhere today, and almost had a touchdown on that backward pass that was recovered off Ernest Jones' sack. Wasn't able to hold on the football, though, before he got to the goal line. That's why he plays defense. Nonetheless, Drake Thomas had an outstanding game, and he is playing confident football right now in the middle of Mike Macdonald's defense. He has been able to handle all the coverage duties. He's getting his hands on footballs. He's flying all over the place. You can see why Mike Macdonald and the coaching staff have given him this opportunity, and he is seizing that opportunity. There's no question about it. And meanwhile, in the secondary, with the injuries the Seahawks are still dealing with, that's supposed to get better coming out of the bye week. But Ty Akata, I've talked so much in the past few weeks about how he's been undervalued by a lot of Seahawks fans and that he has not been to blame for a lot of the mistakes that fans have been charging him for. There ain't much to complain about with Ty Akata tonight. He finished with second most tackles on the team. He had his second sack of the year, came unblocked on a blitz, perfectly timed, and didn't miss on C.J. Stroud. Wrapped him up, corralled him, dragged him to the ground. And he had a really nice pass breakup in the red zone in the fourth quarter on a third down pass play. Next place, the Texans ended up going turnover on downs. They couldn't finish the drive, but Okada took away a touchdown, a sure touchdown with that fully extended swatted pass. So Okada continues to make plays as well. Both those guys are a prime example of how this team is mastering the next man up mentality. These players that were third, fourth, fifth stringers at one point, they're starting and they're thriving. They are not just surviving out there. They are making key plays for the Seahawks defense, and they are gaining confidence, and they're showing that they are at least average caliber players that can play significant snaps when called upon. And that all that credit is deserved for this coaching staff, that they have put these guys in those positions, and the players around them have the chemistry for those guys to come in and not miss a beat. So seeing Thomas and Okada go out there and do what they did, that was really impressive tonight. The two of the best players on the field were Drake Thomas and Ty Okada for the Seahawks. As far as who is not feeling good coming out of this game, I hate to go back to this all too familiar situation for the Seahawks, but we have to start this conversation at right guard. Anthony Bradford, I thought, had the most complete training camp that he has had as a Seattle Seahawk. And I thought in the first few games, were there mistakes? Absolutely. Did he have some plays that looked like the previous 2 years? Sure. But he had really cut down on his penalties. In fact, he didn't have one going into today. He had 2 of them today. He had not given up near as many pressures in pass protection. His run blocking was more consistent. I feel like we're seeing a little bit of regression the last few games. Today, he got bullied in the inside by a couple of interior rushers by the Texans. Sam Darnold had defensive tackles in his lap, far more than what he's had any other game to this point. Give some credit to the Texans for that, but Bradford got busted for a couple penalties, missed several blocks in pass protection as a run blocker, had guys slip off of him, lunge issues. It felt like what we saw a lot the last 2 years. You're hoping that that's something with the bye week, the Seahawks can address some of those things, but that still remains the biggest issue with this offensive line. Does this performance skew what they may or may not do going into the November 4th trade deadline? We'll find out. But Anthony Bradford continuing to play up and down football, and more down tonight than you want to see from your starting right guard. They need him to play at a higher level, or they need to find somebody that's going to. Maybe Christian Haynes is still somebody that could come in and potentially play at a higher level more consistently if he comes off injured reserve. But right now, they need number 75 to play a lot better. Second one, I usually, it's normally a player or a position group. I'm going to call out the coaching staff right now for clock management, because the end of the first half, and I thought this was crucial, especially when the Texans were starting to make things interesting early in the second half and got within 7 points. It was 17-12 after the touchdown for Will Anderson recovering Sam Darnold's fumble. It just felt like the game was slipping away to an extent, and yet the Seahawks weren't being challenged. But end of the first half, the Seahawks had all 3 of their timeouts. They got past midfield, and there was 57 seconds on the clock. They ran a play, and then they let more than 20 seconds run off before they decided to burn a timeout. And then it was 3rd and 4, incomplete pass. They end up settling for a field goal, and it gets blocked. I didn't like the way they handled that any way, shape, or form. You had 3 timeouts. Sam Darnold was throwing the ball really well throughout the first half. Put the ball in your quarterback's hand, aggressive, take time out here so that you're not. I understand you don't want the Houston Texans to get the football back, but look, you have got to continue to be aggressive. You can't be too conservative in that situation. Playing for a field goal is going to come back to bite you, and in this case it did, because the opponent was able to block the field goal. So I did not like any way, shape, or form how that was operated. I feel like that was kind of a cowardly drive, to be frank. I think this offense, with the way they've been able to get the ball downfield, the way their passing game has been, I think you take your opportunities to be aggressive there and go down. And that doesn't mean have Cooper Kupp throw a receiver pass. To me, that's not being aggressive. The guy had never completed a pass in the NFL. I would not call that play. But I'm saying be aggressive, get the ball to your star receiver, JSN, or your tight end, A.J. Barner. Like, you have weapons. Use those, be aggressive, and maximize your time. And I felt like they failed in every way, shape, or form there. So clock management is an area that I think is still an area that Mike Macdonald and his staff, they have room to improve significantly as year number 2 for this staff unfolds. And last on my list here, I hate to keep bringing it up because it's not like he was a non-factor. Boye Mafe did have a pass breakup dropping into coverage, but another game where he didn't have a quarterback hit. He didn't have a sack. I remember maybe one pressure from number 53 the entire game. He didn't have a single tackle. You're not getting the plays that you were hoping to get from Boye Mafe. He still doesn't have a sack this year. He's barely made a blip in terms of getting quarterback hits this year. He has just been a non-factor, and it does seem like he's getting dropped back into coverage more than anybody else, but he's still getting a lot of opportunities to rush. There's just not tangible production there this year from him, and I don't know where that comes from because he looked pretty good last year, and the year before that he had a breakout season, but it's just not coming together for him this year, and the rest of this line was really disruptive. Last week, you saw a few plays from Mafe, but he's just not putting it together the way I think anybody thought he was going to this year. So the lack of production, that is still a guy that I think has so much more to offer the Seahawks than what he's giving them right now. I don't know that it's all on him. Maybe there's just been some system changes with how they're using guys that it's just not playing to his strengths, but I expected a lot more. I know a lot of other people expected a lot more from Boye Mafe. It's just there's too many games where the stats, sometimes you see stats and you're like, this guy was way better when I watched the film. And maybe that'll be the case with Mafe when I watch the All-22, but it just felt like another game where he was extremely quiet. And for them to play to their potential, they need all of their guys up front to be disruptive. I'm waiting for that breakout game from Boye Mafe, and it just has not come yet. We're 7 games into the year. It's been a really quiet season on a contract year for the former second-round pick out of Minnesota. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up later today, we are going to have Tell the Truth Tuesday bye-week edition. It's going to be more of a deeper dive. We'll look at this game and we'll start breaking down some topics, some discussion points coming out of this first 7 games of the season. So make sure you're listening. I'll be rejoined by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. We'll have that show coming your way. And there will also be an extended Seahawks squad show with Anders Hurst and Robert Turbo Turbin. So make sure to be listening in to both those shows coming your way tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy the rest of your evening. Go Hawks.